In the heart of the Appalachian Mountains, there lay an ancient forest known to the locals as the Silent Forest. Few dared to enter, and those who did seldom returned. The forest had earned its name because within its depths, no birds sang, no insects chirped, and no leaves rustled. It was as if sound itself had been swallowed by the dense, foreboding woods. A young woman named Emma had recently moved to the nearby town of Raven's Hollow to escape the noise and chaos of the city. She had always been drawn to nature, finding peace in its embrace. The silent forest intrigued her. She had heard the tales and seen the fear in the eyes of the townsfolk whenever the forest was mentioned. Yet she felt a strange compulsion to explore it, as if something inside her was calling her to uncover its secrets. On a crisp autumn morning, Emma set out for the silent forest. Armed with only a backpack, a flashlight, and her journal, she crossed the threshold where the trees stood like silent sentinels, their gnarled branches reaching out like skeletal hands. The moment she stepped inside, the silence engulfed her. It was profound, almost tangible, pressing against her ears and wrapping around her like a heavy cloak. Emma walked deeper into the forest, her footsteps muffled by the thick layer of fallen leaves. The further she ventured, the denser the trees became, their twisted trunks forming a labyrinthine path. She felt an eerie sensation, as if unseen eyes were watching her every move. Occasionally, she would glance over her shoulder, but there was nothing but the silent, unyielding forest. After hours of wandering, Emma stumbled upon a clearing. In the center stood an ancient, weathered cabin, its wood darkened by years of neglect. It looked as though it had grown out of the forest itself, a natural part of the eerie landscape. Drawn by an inexplicable urge, Emma approached the cabin. The door creaked open with a groan, and she stepped inside. The interior was as silent as the forest, dust motes dancing in the beams of light that filtered through the cracked windows. The air was thick with the scent of decay. Emma explored the cabin, her flashlight revealing old furniture, a rusted stove, and an assortment of antique trinkets. On a table in the corner, she found a journal covered in dust and cobwebs. Curious, she opened it and began to read. The journal belonged to a man named Jonathan Crane, who had lived in the cabin over a century ago. His entries detailed his descent into madness after discovering the forest's dark secret. He wrote of ghostly whispers, shadows that moved on their own, and a malevolent presence that stalked him day and night. Jonathan believed the forest was cursed, its silence a harbinger of the evil that dwelled within. As Emma read further, the entries became more frantic and incoherent. Jonathan described how the forest had taken his wife and daughter, luring them into its depths, never to be seen again. His last entry was a desperate plea for anyone who found the journal to leave the forest immediately and never return. A chill ran down Emma's spine as she closed the journal. Suddenly, the air grew colder and the silence became oppressive. She heard a faint whisper, like a breath against her ear. Heart pounding, she turned around but saw nothing. She quickly gathered her things and left the cabin, her instincts screaming at her to get out of the forest. As she retraced her steps, the whispers grew louder, more insistent. They seemed to come from all directions, surrounding her. Shadows flickered at the edge of her vision, but when she turned to look, they vanished. Panic set in, and Emma began to run, the forest closing in around her like a vice. In her haste, she stumbled and fell, her flashlight slipping from her grasp and rolling away. Darkness enveloped her, and the whispers grew into a cacophony of voices, each one filled with malice and despair. Emma struggled to her feet and fumbled for the flashlight, but it was nowhere to be found. She felt the cold touch of invisible hands brush against her skin, pulling her deeper into the forest. Desperate, Emma remembered the journal's final warning. She pulled it from her backpack and held it tightly, hoping it might offer some protection. The voices hissed angrily, and for a moment, the forest seemed to recoil. She took a deep breath and forced herself to move forward, guided by a faint, almost imperceptible light in the distance. After what felt like an eternity, Emma emerged from the forest, gasping for breath. The sunlight was blinding after the perpetual twilight of the silent forest. She turned back to look at the trees, but the whispers had ceased, and the forest stood as silent and foreboding as ever. Emma returned to Raven's Hollow, shaken but alive. She knew she had been lucky to escape. That night, she couldn't sleep, her dreams haunted by the faces of those who had been lost to the forest's malevolence. She vowed never to speak of her experience, to keep the journal hidden and the forest's secrets buried. But deep within the silent forest, the whispers continued, waiting for the next soul to venture into its silent embrace, to uncover the darkness that lay hidden beneath the ancient trees. And the forest would wait, patient and eternal, for the cycle to begin anew.